course, we want to see action on that immediately. But here's Cleta Mitchell. She was on with Bannon today and said, here's what's going on with Fulton County. We just read a post from her articulating the numbers and explaining just how problematic the math actually is.
I want people to picture in your mind November 4th, the morning of November 4th, the day after the election, the national presidential election. Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger from Georgia went on the Today Show and he said the following, that a record 4.7 million ballots had been cast in Georgia. This is the morning of November 4th. President Trump was in the lead by 103,000 votes, and there were only 94,000 ballots left to count. Now remember, the deadline for receipt of absentee ballots in Georgia in 2020 was when the polls closed 7 p.m. on November the 3rd.
It's over.
So that's a known number the next day, right? Except that when they finished counting the ballots 4 days later, suddenly there were 300,000 more ballots than there were when the polls closed on election day. Absentee ballots that came in, and half of those, 148,000 of those, were from Fulton County. Now let me tell you some things about Fulton County. And all of this is from a 263-page intense report with every document, visual images. You cannot believe the things that are in this report. And I'll tell you where to find the full report. But I wanted to go through those 260 some odd pages and pull out the bullet points that everybody needs to just understand. So let's talk about Fulton County absentee ballots. There were 74,000 absentee ballots that had come into Fulton County by the time the polls closed, the legal deadline by the time the polls closed on November the 3rd. But somehow, 4 days later,
just kept counting.
Instead of those 74,000, there were 148,000.
Total scam.
Plus, just a little over 148,000 absentee ballots that were now suddenly in the mix. Now, where did those come from?
Fanny's booty.
Fulton County election officials ordered on October the 16th over 1 million new absentee ballots.
For whom?
They were ordered without envelopes, even though in order to cast an absentee ballot in Georgia, you have to mail it. You have to put it in an envelope. It has to be sealed in an envelope. And we saw in one of our counts in our lawsuit, our election contest, that was never heard by a judge because no judge was appointed. But our volunteers saw all of these pristine ballots, no folds. Those cannot be absentee ballots. But tens of thousands of these ballots were delivered to the State Farm Arena with no chain of custody. Here's the ultimate data point. According to Fulton County and the Secretary of State records, this is post-election, there were 148,319 absentee ballots in Fulton County counted, included in the totals for Georgia. But only 125,784 voters were recorded as having cast an absentee ballot. That is a difference of 25,535 more ballots than voters who are recorded as having registered for and cast an absentee ballot in Fulton County. So that's 25,535 more ballots than voters. And the margin between President Trump and Joe Biden was 11,779. Now these absentee ballots that came in, there were over 133,000 ballot images deleted. Only 16,000 of the 148,000 absentee ballots, only 16,000 have the actual ballot images that were retained as required by law.
No wonder they're
And people
freaked.
have looked at those ballot images and the images, and they see anomalies, markings changed by timestamps. They believe that those were deliberately deleted. Now that's just in the absentee ballots.
Massive fraud, massive
We
crimes.
get into the tabulators, where the tabulator tapes, that every tabulator has a tape. It is supposed to have a memory card that is put into the tabulator at the beginning. They're supposed to print out a poll tape that says 0, there are no ballots on this machine at the start of the election. And then there's a memory card that's supposed to be put in. There's a seal that is put on, and that is not supposed to be taken off until the polls close from advance voting prior to Election Day, the Friday before Election Day. But what we see in Fulton County, and there's also supposed to be a closing tape. So there's supposed to be every tabulator a tape that has the opening at 0, and at the closing it's supposed to say how many ballots were tabulated by that particular machine. It is supposed to have the serial number of the machine that actually tabulated the ballots. What did they do in Fulton County? There are only 9 tabulators that have opening tapes. There are zero poll tapes that have both the opening tape and the 0 count, the official record of how many ballots were tabulated,
Insane.
and the serial number. There are 0 of the 148 tabulators in Fulton County in 2020. There are zero tabulator tapes with all the required statutory information. There are no
In violation of the law.
qualified numbered voter lists for Fulton County for in-person voting. Every voter who comes in is supposed to be sign in. That becomes the numbered voter list. They know exactly how many have shown up to vote, and none of those the numbered voter list exist. Right? I can go on, and if you look at the reports and the complaints and the documents in this comprehensive report, over 260 pages, and it is mind-blowing. And it's all there, but I thought it was important to bring the highlights out of this. And I'm going to be posting on Twitter and on X and through social,
Thank you,
so that
Tina.
people can see these bullets. And of course, what has happened over the last 5 years? The powers that be, Brad Raffensperger, Chris Carr, the Attorney General, Brad Raffensperger, and Brian Kemp Brian Kemp did one thing at the beginning. One of the people who went and looked at all of this took it to him and showed that from the original count to the hand recount that happens to confirm that the original numbers are correct, there were 6,691 fictitious ballots inserted into the certified total. That's still included in the total. So Joe Rossi from Georgia got the governor to send his people in. They confirmed that Joe Rossi was telling them correctly. Governor Kemp sends a letter over to the Secretary of State and the State Election Board and says, you need to investigate this. Did they investigate that? No, they did not. And then the State Election Board referred it to the Attorney General and said, will you investigate? Did Chris Carr, the Attorney General, investigate?
Nope.
These are nearly 7,000 ballots or votes that have no ballots. There are no ballots to support that 7,000, which again is almost the entire margin between President Trump and Joe Biden.
All right, so amazing report from